bag, and we'll stop recording at the point that we go into breakouts. So just so you know that we'll be able to refer back to this in the future. Let's see. Let me double check. Okay, yeah, it's great to see you all. We will be taking a look at how to incorporate some of the options that we've got on the IDEA website. So I'm going to share my screen and bring you over to our ideas and website. Let's see. Okay. So our ideas and website, the ideas in action. And so here, let me bring you back to the homepage. So here on this homepage, we've got lots of resources. And what I'll do is give you a little tour of what we've got available to you. And then from there, we'll go to our psychological safety page, and then we'll go into the toolkit for today. And then, as I said, we'll have some time for breakouts. And what we'd really like to get to hear from you all are ways in which you're hearing people reacting to the pandemic crisis now at the lab. So first of all, here again is the Ideas in Action website. So thank you to Kelly for all your hard work on developing our website here. So if you take a look over here under topics, then you'll see psychological safety. And this was launched in the fall. So if you recall, maybe some of you weren't here, but in talking about psychological safety, what we're wanting to do is enhance team effectiveness here at the lab. By enhancing psychological safety, which is, encouraging people to be able to do the risk taking that's necessary for us to have more innovation and advance science at the lab. We've got to be able to pay attention to how we're creating this climate where people can feel safe to take these kinds of risks. So here you could see some videos. We have the original talk that Matt Sakaguchi gave from Google about psychological safety. We've got some PowerPoints here. Here are some toolkits, some good reads, some podcasts from Amy Edmonton, who coined the term psychological safety from Harvard Business School, and then some talks and some other resources. Here's a leader discussion guide, which you could all utilize in your own meetings, and then some 1 minutes for ideas. So if you've only got 1 minute at the beginning of the meeting. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a background of all the resources that we have available for you. And again, reach out to us and we can give you a hand in utilizing some of these resources too. So let me go up to this particular link here, and we'll put this link in the chat box. It'd be great if you could open up this link for yourself too, so you have it on your own screens. So yeah, so one thing that we're going to do is encourage you to use the reaction bars, raise your hands, give a thumbs up, yeah, and if you raise your hands, we'll call on you if you have a question or comment too, okay? So here's this new toolkit on fostering psychological safety during times of crisis. How many of you are familiar with the topics of psychological safety that we've covered so far? Could you raise your hands? Great, okay. So for a lot of you, this is something that you're building on, okay. And again, if you have questions or something, put them into the chat box. Of course, during times of crisis, this is incredibly disruptive. We're not just working from home, working remotely. We are working during a crisis. And so this has a huge impact on us as individuals and as a community and as the lab. And there are ways that we can deal with this more effectively and ways that it could be more eroding of our well-being. And so when we've got poor and incomplete communication, because we're dealing with anxiety or having other kinds of issues, this contributes to a breakdown of psychological safety. So again, what is psychological safety overall? If you'll recall from our earlier events, it's the shared belief that members have of a team where they can feel comfortable taking interpersonal risks. When it exists, We all feel more safe to share our perspectives without retaliation. And when we have more psychological safety at work, this of course promotes more teamwork. It encourages our own authenticity. It enables us to speak more openly, fosters learning and innovation, and of course it drives performance and outcomes that enhance our ability to innovate, and it improves retention too. So let's go talk a little bit. Oh, and lady, feel free to pipe in anytime if you have some thoughts on this. Here, I love.
I'm just adding some comments in the chat box. So you'll notice that it says supervisor toolkit, but this doesn't mean that that we can't use some of the tips here. I think if anything, for those who are aspiring leaders at the lab, you can certainly take advantage of these tips, but also it's an ability for all of us to start practicing some of these suggestions, and also to be able to share them with your team and your leaders in your group. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. I love this diagram that contrasts psychological danger versus psychological safety. So let's talk first about what psychological safety looks like over here on the right. What we're wanting to do is increase collaboration, learning, and innovation, right? In order to have that, we've got to increase participation or do things that promote that. And in order to increase participation, we've got to support authenticity. So people being able to bring their whole selves to work, feeling like they're welcome, that their ideas are going to be valued. And when we can demonstrate that, then we have people that are increasing their interpersonal risk-taking. So it becomes this circle of beneficial outcomes, that the more we support interpersonal risk-taking, the more then we can also enhance innovation here at the lab. So this is where we want to be. This is where we hope we are. And this is what's challenged at times like this. Now, looking at the psychological danger, when there's a decrease in, when people aren't feeling like it's safe to talk about what's going on, what you could be having then are all of these aspects in the circle here. There's a decrease in willingness to speak up and share because people feel like, oh, this is maybe not the right time, or I might not be heard. There could be a fear of failure, and then this increased propensity for people to blame each other. All of these dynamics will come together in reducing team effectiveness. So during times of crisis, of course, this is a very, what's the best word for it? This is all incredibly fragile. And so what we're going to want to do, no matter where we started in terms of psychological safety, maybe it wasn't great before, we want to be able to do things that are going to foster and facilitate more. So during times of crisis, of course, we're all dealing with, a range of issues. And let's go over a few of what these issues could sound like. So here are some.
Sorry to pipe in. There are a couple of questions. Do you want to take them now, or do you want to hold them till later when we stop recording?
Let's take some now.
Okay. We have Misha who raised her hand, and then Michael.
Great. Okay. If we're going in that order, go ahead, Misha.
I'm going to say, go ahead, Michael. I apologize. I was kicking my sandwich upstairs. My sandwich had a question.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Misha. Michael?
No, that was in response to Janie's poll before. The hands weren't wiped out, so that's not me. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Right. Thank you for confirming.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Other hands or questions? Okay. Thanks for noting those. Okay. Then what I want to do, again, and if you have this open on your own document, this is a 4-page toolkit. And this is really the crux of what I'd like us to be able to take a look at today. So here are some of the challenges that people might be expressing. They might be people that you have in your circle of friends or in the community in which you're at. But I'll read these off. You might have folks who say, "It's not clear to me what my supervisor's performance expectations are, and my usual support networks aren't available in the same way in this virtual environment. How can I ask for clarity or help without it reflecting negatively on me?" So if you've heard of this come up, feel free to raise your hand or do a thumbs up so we can get a sense of if these are things that you've heard of. Here's another one. Some coworkers are violating the safety procedures that we're all supposed to follow. I don't want to get them in trouble or be considered a troublemaker, but they are putting us all at risk. What should I say to be an effective upstander? And will my team and supervisor back me up? Okay, I'll go on to the next one. I'm overwhelmed trying to balance obligations of work and family, but our team culture is not used to discussing challenging issues related to our private lives. How do I tell my colleagues? Next one. I'm actually doing really well working in the new remote arrangements, but I know that's not true for others. I feel like I shouldn't express this honestly since some of my colleagues are really struggling, and my supervisor is eager to see everyone back at the lab. I want to continue working remotely in the future as much as possible, but I don't know how to talk to my supervisor about it. Are any of these starting to resonate for any of you? Okay, next one. I'm afraid that getting sick will negatively affect my pay or employment. I can't afford to go without work. I'm scared if the lab starts doing layoffs. Okay. And then finally, when my coworkers can't take on tasks because they have kids at home or get sick, I feel like I'd be expected to do more than usual. I don't want to say anything and risk being accused of not being a team player. How can we plan to distribute some of this work more equitably? Okay, so I'm seeing some nods out there. Okay, so let me just run through the rest of this toolkit so you get a sense of what's in here before we go out into breakout sessions where you can talk about some of these responses or reactions to the crisis, okay? So here we've got some options, some approaches to promoting psychological safety. So here's some things that managers can do. And again, as Lady pointed out before, this is not just what managers can do, it's how each of us can contribute to the psychological safety on our teams. So take this to heart. They're all things that we can participate and do. Just as any one of us can lessen psychological safety on a team, we all could contribute to it more. So here are some of the things you can do. There's 7 of them. It's good to know what are the 4 inhibiting factors that hinder psychological safety. Those 4 factors are ambiguity, mismatched expectations, interpersonal or social threats, and employee well-being. And of course, as we're talking about, well-being is really threatened right now. It's so crucial for number 2 to happen that when somebody brings up a challenging discussion, that we honor it and celebrate it as a courageous conversation. So when somebody brings up a difficult thing, it's great to be able to say something like, you know, that must have been hard to talk about. I'm really glad you brought it up. So if you're taking notes on ways to do things, I'll try and give you some hints on things that you can say, but that would be certainly one of them. I encourage you all to practice saying this. So again, something like, wow, that must have been hard to raise that issue, but I'm really glad you did. Let's talk about how we can approach this. So practice empathy and curiosity, number 3. Don't make assumptions or jump to conclusions or change the subject, right? Everyone's experience is unique, so seek to understand the situation from your colleague's perspective. Pay attention to the tone of voice. Even on Zoom, we can notice body language and try and get a sense of the context so that we can gauge how our colleagues are doing while on Zoom or however we're having those discussions. Number 4 is really important. Please try not to rush to give advice or offer solutions. I know it's hard, but this is really important. So try to understand. If someone shares a fear or challenging circumstance, resist the urge to fix it prematurely. Sometimes people share their concerns just to feel seen and validated. So for instance, if an employee is concerned about a sick family member, a response of, oh, I'm sure they'll be okay, could be really counterproductive and come across as disingenuous. So it's much better if you could respond with, I'm glad you shared this with me. Is there anything that would help at this time? or ask, yeah, I'm glad you talked about this. I'm wondering what you're thinking would be the best course of action at this point. So, number 5, clarify roles and expectations. During times of change and uncertainty, take some time to set clear goals and verbalize expectations for employees to help them feel confident in their roles and throughout their projects. Be honest about what you know and what you don't know. Does this resonate for people? I hope it does. Number 6, seek out other resources. Even on a team where employees trust their managers are likely not fully equipped to handle the breadth of employee emotions related to a crisis situation. So know where to direct your colleagues for more support, such as connecting with peers, other leaders, our ERGs, the employee resource groups, the employee assistance program, which I think we could all utilize more. And then also some of the external resources that HR has put together for us. So these are live links on your handouts. And then finally, know that you could be escalating your questions and concerns. So follow the criteria for managers when handling questions, concerns, or allegations made by employees. You should also be prepared to channel information to the appropriate function, perhaps talking with your HR division partner and making sure that you're going to the next level of leadership and asking for guidance. So that's a rundown of this toolkit. And at this point, what I'd like to do, are there any questions or concerns? Thoughts? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Is that, okay, good. Then how about this?
Jenny, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Hi, sorry about that. I was wondering, given the novelty of this current situation, and this came to me when I was talking to a supervisor in my area just yesterday, as a matter of fact. He was suggesting that he himself has never had any kind of training that could have prepared him for a situation quite so dire and so different, and it sort of got me to wonder how is the organization, how is our institution moving to help those who are in supervisory positions to know how to deal with their supervisees when we have a situation that they themselves have just never encountered before, and perhaps just simply do not know. They want to, but at least he seemed to suggest that he's a bit at wit's end at the moment, that he just doesn't quite know how to reach. I mean, he was asking me if I could offer him some information on what I thought was going on with some of my colleagues.
Wow.
And the reason for that was because he wasn't sure. He had tried to reach out to some of them through the normal ways that he normally does and hadn't heard back from them. And just was so he was thinking, I should figure out a way to do this better, but I don't quite know.
Well, one thing that this person did that was great was reach out to you. I think it's really crucial that we not try and go these things alone. There are all kinds of people throughout the lab that are here to help. And we might not know all those different resources all by ourselves, but by reaching out and talking with other people, we're able to share resources. So certainly, let's see, speaking with our office, we could help direct. Again, the HR division partner could certainly be an important person to check in with. Lady, you probably have some other ideas too of places that this person could go to.
Yeah, I appreciate your comment, Yao. I think we're on day, what is it, 50 something now of shelter in place, and I've been tracking this on my calendar where today is day 59.
Wow.
So tomorrow is day 60. In the last, I'll just round up, 60 days, we've been trying to figure out what is it that we need to do, whether it's from an institutional perspective, a leader perspective, individual contributor, in terms of how is our role changing? Are we working from home? Are we coming in to keep the lab in a safe and stable mode? What are the expectations if we are in a centralized function that supports the lab as our customers? So there's lots of different considerations. I would say for our office, in trying to understand our new normal in the last 60 days, tried our best to put out some resources and some toolkits for our staff and our supervisors, at least to assist in the meantime. So one of the things, in addition to the psych safety page, we've put together a page called Virtual Teams. So it's under topics there than Janie's looking at. And this page is really to support the remote environment that a lot of us are in right now. Not everyone is in this, but a lot of us are in here. So there's some trainings here that people can take a look at. If you scroll up, sorry, Janie. If you scroll up, we're connected to LinkedIn Learning, and so there's some curated training there and a list of those. And then for supervisors and employees, are a couple of different toolkits around running effective virtual meetings, best practices for that. If you're doing interviews and you're in an interview committee, how are you doing those remotely? If you are have an opportunity to facilitate this is 60 minutes, excuse me, an hour-long discussion because of our new environment. As a supervisor or manager, they can take a look at this, and there's even a team exercise which includes a communication charter in terms of what's the expectations for how our team is going to communicate during this time, and even a link for a team exercise for team members to review in terms of what are the new expectations in how we're interacting. So all that to say, it's there, it's made available. But I think what we're trying to consider next, as you know, we have a new learning and organizational development consultant. Her name is Aditi Chakravarti, and she just started at the lab in March. So right before we sheltered in place, she started. And as you know, or as you might know, Kia Afkari, who was the head of that organization or that department, had since left the lab. So Aditi's getting caught up on what she needs to know. She's been at the lab 60 plus days, maybe 70 for being generous. And how is it that, she can think about learning for the organization and learning for supervisors. We have about 700 supervisors. And how can we integrate some of the things that we're talking about in IDEA as part of their overall training, whether it's part of them being an inclusive leader, or if you go to stewardship.lbl.gov, there are the 3 pillars of stewardship, one of them being people stewardship. So I think at this point now, I think we're trying to determine how to operationalize some of these things in, our programs that currently exist. In the last 60 days, we've just tried to push things out as best as we could to help guide people along the way. But I think as this continues on and as we are in this state, for a little bit longer, I think then it's time to start operationalizing and start integrating some of the things that we're sharing into the more institutional sort of trainings or offerings that we have at the lab. So that was a long answer, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, and very, very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
Great. Okay. Any other questions or comments before we go into breakouts? Okay. All right. Okay. So what we'd like you to do is have some time to spend with 2 or 3 other colleagues where you could talk about the types of challenges or fears that folks are facing, whether they're in our community, in your circle of friends or family, maybe you yourself. What I'd like you to do is respect confidentiality in your breakout group and just present it as, I heard that somebody is dealing with X, Y, and Z. And again, the types of the types of challenges that were on page 2 and 3 of the handout. So Kelly will sort you into breakout groups. You'll have 5 minutes to talk. We'll remind you of what it is that we want you to do. which will be, let's see, what kinds of personal concerns have you heard of on your team, in your circles or community during this pandemic related to working? So that's going to be your prompt. And what I'd like you to do is keep in mind what gets reported to you so that you could report it out to the plenary when we return in about 5 or 6 minutes. Okay?